Everyone, my name is Kim Owens and I'm with Caffeine Buzz. You are at the live streaming session that's covering bands, brands, and new technologies. And ironically, it's being live streamed right now, so you can wave to all your fans. I have an esteemed panel with me today talking about, and these are people who have been in the live streaming space for a long time, have seen it evolve quite a bit just in the last couple of years. And they've got really in-depth experience that they're going to share with you today on where this is headed, why it matters, how it's influencing not only the entertainment space, but the branding and advertising side of things, and then talking about the potential for even taking this further with immersive technologies. So my name is Kim Owens. I am the founding editor of Caffeine Buzz, and I write and research and have interviewed several of the people on this panel. So I cover where technology is headed, how it impacts branding and marketing, and the part that music, film, and other forms of entertainment play. I'm also a content marketer, and I work with clients to really create their content strategy, help them build their audiences, develop long-term relationships with their target audiences, be it B2B or B2C. And so, in this realm, I kind of bring everything together because I'm starting to work with more entertainment companies. So that's me, and I'll let the other people on the panel introduce themselves.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm John Petrocelli. I'm the founder of Bulldog Digital Media. We are a live streaming agency and strategy company. We help optimize live streamed experiences. We have a heavy emphasis on music and how to bring those to life on connected devices for the benefit of all the stakeholders. And we also work with a large group of music experiences, promoters, and festivals, et cetera, to kind of help guide their strategy in the live streaming marketplace.
Hi guys, I'm Brian Anderson. I work at YouTube. I lead global music sponsorships. So I sell brand sponsors around our live music festivals and original programming in the music space and other fun projects like that.
Hi, I'm Mark Scarpa. I'm the founder and executive producer director from a company called Simply New. We've been specializing in live participatory media for, I guess since about 1996, very beginning of streaming. And very happy to be a part of this esteemed panel.
Hi, my name is Dan Saxton. I'm the head of content for a company called VR Live. We've been live broadcasting 360 content since we were duct taping together GoPros, and a lot of concerts, a lot of sporting events, festivals, and even a Super Bowl commercial. So yeah, happy to be here.
We will be talking about.
Very cool. Hi, I'm Eddie Vaca, founder and CEO of a company called Amp Live. We help live broadcasters essentially amplify their audiences in real time. We focus on organic, distributed, and retargeted audiences so that you can turn your viewers into customers.
Hey, I'm Raymond Roker. I'm the head of content for AEG Studios. AEG Studios launched earlier this year with the goal of pairing up the best of creative and content development with our partners through global partnerships under AEG. I also head up the Coachella webcast for Golden Voice, and I've been in the content space for over 2 decades, and over the last 10 years have really moved into video and content creative around those areas.
Thank you so much. So one of the things I want to start with is a live streaming experience, especially at the size of Coachella or Lollapalooza or some of the larger festivals, really requires those brands to come in and partner with the promoters to make that happen. So one of the things that is going on right now is there's a lot of turmoil within the ad space right now. So what we're going to cover is, where is streaming and where's the traditional ad model headed, and how are these larger brands like Toyota and some of the others, American Express, Citi, how are they looking to look at streaming content as an alternative to traditional advertising? How are all these forms of content that have increasingly become, really viable on OTT and mobile devices even in the past few years, and then how brands are using that form of brand engagement to connect with their consumers and fans. So people are passionate about music. There's been lots of studies. This one was done in partnership with AEG and an agency out in New York. And everybody talks about millennials, and you kind of get tired of that term in general because it's a very broad category. But the fact of the matter is that the sweet spot of where people or major brands are really looking at is the 26-year-olds, a little bit younger, a little bit older. But those people have been proven to really enjoy and connect with music at all levels in their personal life, with their friends, and music being a part of a brand experience has actually, as opposed to maybe older generations who kind of pushed against that as selling out, the younger generation actually embraces it. And so what's going on right now in traditional advertising is you've got the proliferation of ad blockers because people, young and old, just don't like ads. There's whether it be live television or on your phone. The proliferation is there, and there's no denying it. So different platforms and even TV networks are making changes, including YouTube is planning on dropping the 30-second pre-roll ad spot. The NFL, which, the last forms of live TV that are the most engaged are sports and maybe award shows. But even they are looking at the fact that ads they're getting pushback from the audience. And so they're testing the 6-second ad spots on the NFL and really shortening that ad block time that they dedicate during an NFL game. And they tested it by running this Old Spice ad, which I still have not been able to figure out this particular picture of what they're trying to portray here, but they ran an Old Spice commercial on the Teen Choice Awards, and so they're testing out the 6-second ad format, and then they're porting that over into the NFL. So that's why they're looking at all these different ways to still use traditional advertising, but in a way that will not really, get pushback from consumers. But the fact is, too, is that, the major brands are very cognizant of the fact that they need to change their strategy. They need to look at their ad spend and maybe decide that what they're putting into traditional advertising in the millions is maybe not money well spent. So you've got major people coming out from MasterCard. Mark Pritchett from P&G has been very vocal about how digital advertising, programmatic advertising, traditional advertising, and the agencies, they're putting their feet to the fire and really demanding to understand in a more transparent way really what they're getting on the ROI side of things. According to the World Federation of Advertisers, these major CPG brands are doing really in-depth audits across the board. And if you look at we all know that the growth of video has been exponential, and it has been, TV in general TV is definitely suffering. And so there's been even more, there's so much, even at this session this week, this conference this week, branded entertainment, branded content, sponsored content, is buzzwords for a very good reason, is that people want to enjoy, even if it's a 6-second ad, they want to be entertained, they want to be engaged, they want to be educated. But what live streaming and these types of experiences can provide is actually hours and hours of engagement, which is really unheard of. And that's why advertisers are getting so much more involved in wanting to be a part of it. So this was a recent article that came out in Adweek, and you're going to see more and more of these articles. And so I want to go ahead and dive into. I'm going to go all the way back here. Sorry. So live streaming was really set of the festivals and what these guys have played a part in have really set the stage for where we're seeing live streaming in Facebook, on Snapchat, obviously on YouTube, and so I want to talk about how with the proliferation of content coming at everybody, from Netflix, from Hulu, you know, there's so many choices now. If and any of you can chime in on this, you know, how have you seen live streaming activations evolve over even just the last couple of years as opposed to, you know, when you first got started in this game? John, you want to start?
Yeah, I think taking from, you know, the problem that live streaming is kind of a tonic, we believe, for some of the three major problems that brands are facing. You know, I think there's no denying now that cord cutting is a significant problem. I've seen, you know, some of the data suggest there'll be 22 million cord cutters at the end of this year, 34 million cord nevers, and 700,000 aggregate households in the country are going to quote unquote cut the cord. So a big challenge with brands to effectively engage a consumer. Secondarily, ad blocking, massive problem. I think those numbers, you know, you see 615 million ad blockers on devices. So now some of this ad inventory is not even making it to people on their connected devices. Thirdly is the issue of brand safety, right? You're putting content up next to things that you can't control. You don't know what it is. It's objectionable, fake news, inflammatory, something that you would want your brand associated with. And what we've seen is brands now look at live streaming and live content as an effective tool against those issues. In fact, delivering back reach, engagement, and metrics. And consumers today now want to have this collaborative and participatory experience. So what we've noticed even just in this past year are brands reallocating traditional spends and going into things like a concert, a festival, a performance, a product launch, a movie premiere. This is how they effectively will engage a consumer. And the results largely speak for themselves. We see 10, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 60 minutes of persistent user engagement. And this is people, you know, tuning into that live experience, but they're also engaged with the brand presenting the video experience to them. And there's all kinds of optimization tactics you can take to really drive that engagement time deeper and deeper and deeper. And what we're starting to see based on some of these challenges and also some of the platforms now prioritizing live video, and you also have this growth of social media tools. People, in fact, now they have the device on them, and they have the ability to post, comment, share, tweet, etc. They want to have that real-time moment. So we're starting to see a pretty significant growth both in interest in doing this, but also budget allocation and strategy around, you know, how do I get behind this experience? How do I amplify it and bring it out to a more engaged audience?
I'll chime in there. I think live streaming has evolved tremendously. I think that, you know, back in the days, I come from Ustream. If you guys are familiar with that platform, you know, people just tune into anything for any reason. I think consumers are very picky about the content that they watch today. So brands are getting smarter, and they're starting to target the viewer. They're starting to understand that not all content is made for everyone, and that if I really want to be effective with making a sponsorship to a concert, that I have to actually deliver it to people that are interested in that topic. So it's evolved tremendously just on the audience development side of things. People are really looking at the data, the audience data, and then making decisions based on that. So it's something that wasn't available back then.
I'll add to that. My perspective is the VR perspective, but also because I used to manage the Roxy on Sunset, my perspective is from the artist perspective too. And back in the day, the artist did not want to be seen live at all. So people want to live stream, it's not going to happen. But then when Yahoo Live started doing their thing, the artists started to open up, and now it's just kind of like an expected thing almost that the artists like understand, okay, let's do it. I mean, we're going to be live, there's phones everywhere, who cares? I feel like the brands are like, yes, awesome, let's get involved in that. From a VR perspective, the brands, it's been a buzzword, you know, VR and AR, let's do something and look innovative, whatever it is. So it's been good, but the brands have backed off a little bit lately.
Yeah, I would echo a little bit of that as well. I think that the initial opportunity for live streaming was kind of met with a bit of this was a requisite part of maybe what we're doing. Maybe there's a sponsor element to it. Okay, well, they'll put this festival online. But today, it's clearly part of the marketing mix on the festival side. It's part of the marketing mix for the artist. I can't tell you how many artists clamor to be in the live stream now. And the festival has to think about that live stream as part of an overall social content mix that is quite complicated these days, obviously, with all these other platforms. So I think the biggest change that I've noticed is really just the fragmentation of audience even within the festival social community, and you're really trying to talk to a cohort that might be in front of their device watching the live stream, but simultaneously there's a whole other cohort that's on Snapchat and just looking at user-generated stuff, and how to capture that all and talk to them simultaneously in their own in special ways is really the challenge for music events.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. From the brand perspective, I think it's also worth noting that, because there is so much content out there, when a brand is looking to launch a new product or release a new message, they need to find something that's going to create a moment. And I think that's one area where live streams can really shine. I think, it's a cultural moment. People know that it's happening. People come. And if you're a brand who's releasing a new phone or a new tablet or a new laptop, it's important to sort of harness buzz like that when it comes around, given that so much content is consumed on demand and in other ways. So I think live really satisfies that need for brands to find moments to attach to.
And do you think music in particular, because music is such a strong emotional type of content to connect with, do you think music in particular has a really strong kind of place within this whole ecosystem of branded and entertainment content?
Yeah, definitely.
So, going back to old man days of live broadcasting, when the first large-scale live event in history was the Tibetan Freedom Festival in 1996, which I had the dubious honor of producing. The reason for that happening as a live stream, and at that time, live streaming just didn't even really exist. Nobody knew what it was. But the reason why that happened was, to your point, Dan, is the artists. And it was also out of necessity, which was the fact that nobody, because of the nature of the event being very political, meaning MTV or any of the traditional television broadcast networks, would actually broadcast that show live, or even broadcast parts of that show, because they feared that sponsors would pull out or would not support it. It was very political, very controversial. So I think in the early years, it was a way for artists to be innovative, for them to try the shiny new toy like they are doing now with VR and AR. But 20 years later, it's definitely emerged into a business, and it's a 360 business, and it's inherent to have that as part of your strategy as a marketer with regards to the music strategy, because it's ultimately going to help sell records and downloads and so on. But it also gives you the audience an opportunity to have a direct relationship with the artists in a way that they've never had before. You have artists now that are, that it could be a completely branded experience, but the artist is just going live from their personal mobile phone when they want to. There's no production company around them. It's not produced. It's very authentic. And all of that has to have a participatory element as well. And the funny thing is, you look at platforms like Facebook and even YouTube, with all of the innovation that they have put out there in terms of making the tool sets easier to publish and go live with. The participatory elements that these gigantic platforms have are really, I think still nascent. We've had live video with chat room going since 1996. That's Facebook Live, that's YouTube Live. Sure, now you can purchase things and do some other innovations with it, which the brands are becoming more and more attracted to. But ultimately, I think that the giant platform companies have to keep focusing on reinventing how that participatory experience may be. You look at something like now. Sure, maybe the user experience isn't great in terms of the UX and UI of the platform,
but it's, you know, you're gamifying the live experience, right? So that's interesting. That's a unique element to it. Or you're looking at Twitch in terms of how they're doing certain things. So I would love to see the big platforms innovate even more in a way that would create a new experience for the audience that would be useful for the brands as well.
And I'm going to actually get into that, especially after some announcements in that space over the last couple of days.
Absolutely.
Ray, do you want to weigh in on that? Considering the fact that you know, AEG, global, you know, music entertainment brand, has actually, you know, developed this, you know, branded studio, and you're heading up things.
Yeah, I mean, what you said is true. There's definitely a very big opportunity right now for brands, and this live setting, that's not the only place we concentrate, but that's part of it. You know, the reason for what we're doing really is that there's an intersection of brands and live event culture that is very exciting, and so we're trying to kind of be that matchmaker to kind of bring those stories to life, bring those stories into the brand context, and, you know, give brands a place in the conversation that it can be difficult and cluttered these days. Like Brian was saying, kind of the live moment is that kind of remaining tune-in moment where there's like a zeitgeist, kind of, you know, I was watching ACL the other day, and it's like, yes, there was a rebroadcast and there were some other opportunities to catch the content, but I was interested that there was a show going on right now, you know, for a band that I liked, and I stayed glued. And that's so rare these days, you know. So I think music does have that place. It still is one of the biggest draws. It blurs lines geographically, culturally, language-wise, and everything. So I think there's a lot of space there to iterate, and part of this is you know, that at-home experience as well, and that social experience, which is probably better for some of the other panel to talk about. But I think there's definitely a lot of place to grow that part of it.
Are there any conversations that are taking place with brands that you're working with where they're actually saying, you know, we're actually going to be changing our budgets, or we're looking for something, you know, we're going to be shifting our strategy away from maybe, you know, what they've been spending on, you know, in the past? You know, Brian?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, we spend a lot of time and energy speaking to advertisers and agencies about, you know, moving TV budgets over to digital, and how TV and digital can work better together, and have had a lot of success in that space. So, you know, I think it's better right now to be on the digital side than the TV side. I'll say that.
John, do you get? Are you having conversations with any ad agencies or that are hoping to kind of, you know, save face with some of their clients?
Yeah, we are for sure. There's a deep interest in live content in general, right? But if you want to get into NBA, NFL, MLB content, that's like $1 billion to be or something of that order of magnitude to be the official partner of somebody like the NFL, which opens up the music discussion. What we've seen is music content in general has a global appeal versus a certain part of the world. And secondarily, if you look at this, you know, the promoters are very entrepreneurial and they're very creative. In addition to attracting these big audiences to their festival, they're also offering quite a bit in return beyond the lineups that they're curating. Food, fashion, lifestyle, art, causes. There's some pretty interesting things happening on these grounds. So the content opportunity is, in addition to what's happening on the stages, what's happening in and around these experiences. So it becomes a pretty attractive conversation for brands. Maybe a brand wants to power that live experience, but a brand that lives in the culinary world wants to look at some of the chefs that have been brought to the festival, or some of the, you know, I've gone to Coachella and had a 4-star pop-up dinner at 7 o'clock, and by 8 o'clock I was watching Florence and the Machine. That's, to me, justified the value of any ticket I could have purchased. So there's a lot of opportunity in the content. So we talk to media buying agencies about why this is a more attractive return on their investment. You're also reaching an audience. I think millennials, 88% of millennials list music as their #1 passion or their hobby. So connecting to content in and around that experience, also doing it in a live environment, you're now connecting to a consumer in an authentic way, and you're reaching them. But you're also getting interesting data, where they are, how long they're watching, who's on iOS, who is on Android. There's a lot of great data that comes back to these brands as well, and also for the for artists, right? They may find they have a huge audience in a certain region of the country or a certain part of the world, and that helps with future planning for tours and future performances.
Yeah, I think John touched on a lot of points that are relevant, but one most important is the analytics. They've gotten incredibly more robust, and that's really due to the giant platforms like YouTube and Twitch and Facebook, giving more of that analytic data, especially around the world of live, back to the publisher and who can share that with the brand. Promoters in general used to look at just any kind of video broadcast on site as a cost and expense, right? We've all been to a show, and most shows of any scale or any size have video IMAG, right? You've got 50, 100,000 people there. You're all the way in the back. You can't see anything. So there's a bunch of video screens everywhere. That hasn't changed in 20, 30 years. In the 90s, they didn't think to even broadcast that out. We would literally set up a whole separate setup that was just for live streaming in addition to IMAG. Then it became merged, right? Then the perfect example is what Hank Neuberger and you guys did over at Coachella. That had an IMAG situation. They then monetized that IMAG, and now they've turned it into actually legitimate programming that has an experience attached to it and has far exceeded everyone's expectations, and it's a revenue generator for the promoter. But there's not a lot of those opportunities out there. So to get the big brand dollars, you need something that has massive scale, and then on top of it, we'll be able to amplify that message out where you can get the analytics that will attract the brand to put up the dollars necessary to fund something of that nature. I think it'd be interesting. I'd love to hear from John and some of the other panelists, like what we're thinking, what's going on in terms of micro sponsorships. So again, you might just have a singular artist that wants to do their own sort of real-time autobiographical diary or something along those lines. What type of money is going into that part of the space that may not have performances tied to it or big productions and elaborate programming? I'm interested in, maybe you might be able to answer that one, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, we would, look for individual single sponsors for these events, and then over the past couple of years, we have found a lot of success with, multiple packages, packages that are divided up by geography, so selling different audiences in different countries around the same events. I think there's a lot more opportunity there. It can be really tricky just in terms of conflicts and keeping messages straight. It's a big challenge on social in particular, when you have multiple brands who are talking about the same event and sharing the same links. But I agree, there's a lot of opportunity with smaller packages, and to John's earlier point, there might be a brand who's interested in the food, or a brand who's interested in the road to sort of content. So there are a lot of different content angles that can attract a lot of different advertisers, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity to do more deals around these things.
I'll champion a brand that I championed a year ago at this conference, but I think what they're doing with Boiler Room and with BAT TV, I think those are an example of micro sponsorships, right?
It's a prime example.
And they're tapping into something that up until the time they were doing it, I don't even know if it was conceived that would even be interesting, but it's DJ sets, on rooftops and basements at small clubs and all sorts of locales all over the world. Thriving marketplace, and they're integrating brands in cool ways. There's a little bit of product placement sometimes, if it's a Budweiser, and obviously they get to present this series or this night, and those are much more smaller scale and lots of audience potential. It's
really interesting how Boiler Room has evolved over the many, many years, because growing up in Silicon Valley and going to raves and stuff in San Francisco back back in the day, and how that emerged how that kind of flowed into the internet boom and bringing those two worlds together, how even that intimate setting of a DJ set that they would do, that we would show up to the warehouse and we would hear that there's some, the version of live streaming back then was very archaic as opposed to what it is now. But it was so exciting to see that firsthand and see how much it's evolved just in the last couple decades. But one thing I want to hit on is so the analytics side of things and the data side of things. So Amp Live and Bulldog recently developed a partnership, and it's all based on extending the reach of the fans who have engaged with the content through your projects, or if I'm explaining that correctly. Tell me tell us how this came together and where you see the evolution of data analytics and really delivering to your brands a clear understanding of where their audiences are, how they're engaging, for how long, and how that can impact their business overall and even other forms of advertising and branding in their business.
Sure. We looking at this business as a media strategy. Media people want results for their investment, i.e., tune-in, eyeballs, engagement, et cetera. And I think I looked at this through the lens that we have a long-term relationship with Coca-Cola in Mexico, and we power a massive festival for Coke. Historically, that's lived on this. We stand up a pretty robust microsite in territory that has 11.5 hours of live video, Saturday and Sunday, both days of the festival, and 3 channels of video. So you can switch between those. It's about 80 artists performing. Very successful engagement for Coke. This year they said, hey, we want to extend that to our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter platforms. So it started to resonate with us that people were investing in these experiences and they needed to reach a bigger, broader audience. So we looked at how do we help them do that, and in effect we discovered, working with Amp Live, that we can deliver a tune-in. We can justify the expense very economically and reach a viewer threshold, whether that's 100,000 views, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. It's up to the brand on what they want to do. So this now becomes, we're trying to solve challenges and problems, right? And this partnership allows us, by turning on this impactful, powerful syndication engine that Amp Live brings, we now can reach this targeted viewer threshold and also retarget viewers and bring them on to other days of the experience, or to other things that might happen in a series. Maybe it's a series of shows brought to you by Samsung or MasterCard. But I'll let Eddie kind of add to some of that.
I think what was originally attractive to the partnership was, who he was working with. Coca-Cola, obviously very attractive, but on his side was our audience data. So yes, we do deliver. I mean, what Facebook and YouTube do really well is they deliver video metrics. How long it played for, who watched it, on what device. That's great. We deliver audience metrics. Who watched it, who are they, where are they coming from, what are their interests, what are their behaviors. So now you can take action against that, and action is everything, right? So when Coca-Cola comes to Bulldog and says, hey, we really want to reach this new audience, it's actionable. We facilitate data connections between us and different partners that allow that action or that data to be used for exactly what John said. If Samsung came and wanted to push a series, they can now do that to whoever tuned in live to their live event. So audience data is everything for us. It's actually our backbone. We have 150 million profiles worldwide. We serve about 20 to 30 million live streams per month. And each time we do that, we collect a little bit more information on whoever tuned in, whether that be they're watching a cooking show live or a concert. Now those become interest and behaviors that we can target against and then deliver more live streams to. So the partnership makes a whole bunch of sense, working with some great brands, and then we have an audience data that no one else in the world has, or an audience data pool that no one else has in the world. So
I want to touch on something that I didn't actually privy you guys on, but something from an ad tech and a marketing perspective on my end is the GDPR, the Global Data privacy, I think, regulation based in the EU, but it affects, if you've got audiences that are tuning in from all over the world, even though you're based here in the US, if you're collecting information on people outside of the US that are located in the EU, you have to meet certain regulation criteria on the privacy of that data and how it's protected and what you're doing with that data. Do any of you guys have to deal with anything along those lines, especially Eddie, considering you're a data-focused company?
No comment. Yeah. So I got this, Eddie. No comment. Next question.
What I was going to say is yes, we actually take PII information very seriously. So we anonymize all of our data. Some of the hurdles that we're trying to work through, especially around the European laws, is exactly that. How do we keep our data connection flowing without violating? It's a big hairball of a mess. So we're taking our time. We're working through it. But yeah, it's something that's on our radars for sure. Okay, cool. So I want to dive into the future is now technology side of things, and especially with Dan here at the table. So one of the as John mentioned, Coke decided to invest in VR live streaming this past year, and a number of other, Coachella's been doing it for a few years, and some of the other larger festivals have as well. So there's a lot of discussion over AR versus VR, and it's not really one versus the other. It's all about, what is the why? Why do you want to invest in this type of technology? What's your goal? Who's your audience? What do you hope to accomplish? And then you build out your strategy from there. But there's been a lot of changes in VR just in the last couple of days, with Ozo coming out and saying that they're cutting out their, or Nokia coming out and saying they're cutting off their Ozo line, and they're not, that's going away, and they're having layoffs. At the same time that Oculus came out with these, brand new, announcement about, they're getting to a point where they can have a headset that's not really like high quality headset that's not tied to a computer. And then
and only $200.
Yeah, and then Facebook has they announced it kind of in conjunction with that they're going to take their VR experience, their VR spaces, which is a social interaction in VR, and really extend it into the live music experience with their platform Venue. So first, how do you keep up with all this stuff, considering that your agency is focused on VR, and where do you what's your opinion about all these changes that are happening and the potential for them to keep VR as a viable medium?
That's a lot. I would say that 75% of our day is just keeping up with the entire industry and what's happening. I mean, we're a heavy part of what's happening. The Ozo camera has been used awesome with us. We did the Super Bowl commercial with those. We live streamed the iHeart Awards with that. It's an awesome workflow for sure, but we're not stopping. It's kind of like next man up. There's a bunch of camera options that we've been working with developers.
You and I had a conversation at NAB.
Yeah.
We were discussing the fact that Ozo was so expensive, and we were standing next to the Insta360 booth.
Yeah.
And they had a 3K camera that was essentially doing the same thing?
Yeah, it's pretty comparable. The Ozo is a $60,000 camera, and then they brought it down to $45,000.
Right.
And then maybe 2 weeks ago, they made an announcement that it was going to be $25,000. And then 2 days ago, they're like,
the fire sale price?
They're like, we're going to move on to
the warehouse special.
Yeah, but that's cool. That's cool. They've been amazing to work with, and everyone has to make their decisions. But I don't see that as a signal that there's, VR is in shambles or something.
Right.
It's inevitable that things are moving this way. The focus now for us has been moving into helping these other companies prepare. So we developed the entire VR and AR platform for Universal Music Group. It's called Vertigo, vrtgo.com, which is on all the VR platforms, but also it's on the browser. Which is amazing, helping a lot of companies just come up with what's next. And AR has been a big part of that, because we see that as the bridge Just connecting the physical space with the digital space, kind of conditioning society to understand what's going on. I mean, you don't have to wear this huge thing on your head at this point,
Right.
But it's been a fun ride for sure.
So talking about the Hyundai commercial, is anybody here familiar with the Hyundai commercial during the Super Bowl this last year? Did anyone see it? Yes? Yeah.
Thanks, yeah, that was cool. I could explain what it was.
Yeah.
We brought 3 military families to a suite at the Super Bowl in Houston. Each of them had their own VR live broadcast system. We mic'd them up. It was mostly moms and kids, grandparents, and we live broadcast that to Poland, to a NATO base where their parents were stationed, where their dads were stationed, and one mom. And we live broadcast that into 3 20-foot diameter cylinders and had 5 projectors, so they could, basically they were surprised, the soldiers were surprised, walked into a virtual suite, and they were there with their families and they could talk, and it was pretty, I was at the Super Bowl, which was amazing, especially when it started at halftime. But just seeing the emotion, it was such a profound use of the technology. And from the brand side, that's what is so important to them, has been in the immersive, which is all I can really comment on, is the immersive technologies and the brands with that. But they want to touch people. They want, and the immersive really allows you to do that. It's an empathy machine.
And did they want to up their game, no pun intended, because there's so much competition for Super Bowl commercials,
right.
And why commercials can't be quality year-round is kind of beyond me. But, so speaking, about the fact that not only the brand but the agency, well, it's an internal agency in Ocean, but they wanted to really continue to expand and take risks, because that's a risky endeavor. And brands,
it's so risky.
You know what I mean?
So risky.
Most large companies in general don't really like that kind of risk.
That was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of pressure.
But John, you were involved in the Snickers commercial during the Super Bowl that was really live streamed. It wasn't the VR side of things, but it was all live.
Right.
Live is
live.
Yeah, so Snickers, if you saw the game, third quarter, did a live commercial building on their theme of, you're not yourself. If you're hungry, you don't perform properly. They're added to that, an ambitious play to offer 36 hours of continuous live streaming Thursday into Friday, which involved YouTube stars Tyler Oakley, AJ Green from the Bengals, Betty White, performances, skits, etc., all kind of related to this theme of what would happen during the game. And by the way, during the game, the in-broadcast spot was 30 seconds. The live stream companion was an additional 15, so 45-second experience. For Snickers, that's a lot of things happening, ongoing in that continuous 36-hour engagement. But it became a very compelling and a very successful strategy for Snickers. I think at the end of their synopsis in their summary was 1.5 billion unique impressions, 5 million live streams served, and 20 million minutes of branded content consumed. So pretty interesting strategy where you align this digital strategy with their broadcast strategy.
Now, in relation to that, when you're talking about, from a marketing perspective, we're always thinking about repurposing content. How can we invest once and use many? But you have to do that, obviously, in a very smart and strategic way. With live streaming and the fact that brands, so maybe Snickers was, or another brand was involved in live streaming on the festival side of things. Are you having conversations where they're saying, actually, now that we've done this in this realm, we have the experience with it, can we parlay that into other uses of live streaming? And is there the potential to repurpose the content that you've captured during that live streaming experience and use it in other ways, in short, Snapchat videos or anything along those lines? Have you had those kinds of conversations with brands?
Oh yeah, everything that we live stream is repurposed, pretty much. It's cut down to a smaller piece, but. One thing I forgot to mention was the analytics that we're doing too, because the interesting part about the VR analytics is you can actually tell where people are looking. There's eye tracking software that you could tell people where these people are actually looking. So we did a sugar water, I'll just say sugar water piece. It was a concert, and we had a little logo off to the side. And if
So
you
like
look
product
at it,
placement
something
kind of
happens.
thing? Yeah.
So you look at it, and now you're in the bubbles, and the bubbles are all around you, and you're in the bottle of the sugar water. And it's just a fun thing. We kind of trained the audience that if you look at these things, something's going to happen. So we could figure out, okay, how many people are actually engaging with the content? So the brands loved that for sure. Mm-hmm. Which doesn't answer your last question at all, sorry.
But it was a cool comment.
Well, Mark, you've had experience in episodic programming. And that's something that has come up quite a bit this last couple of days, and even a conversation I had with a friend of mine who's a producer on this potential project for a documentary. So he pitched it to Netflix and Amazon and got a buy-in, but they wanted it to be an episodic approach to the storytelling, and instead of like a traditional documentary. Has that been discussed? I mean, about taking, saying, okay, phase one is the live streaming, but we're going to actually capture this offstage content, or, content that isn't just the performance, and create more episodic programming around the live music experience?
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on a couple of points, there are broadcasting, whether it's been live, and if you go back in history, TV was not a recorded medium, right? It was a live medium. It started that way. It was black and white. You went out. And what made that scalable was formats. So formats of the type of programming that you're creating. So if you're creating a format, whether it's for episodic, and it's just a creator video or a TV show like Game of Thrones, that's a format. And the same in the live world. We talked about Boiler Room. Boiler Room is a format. We've seen, and I've produced many, techno DJ webcasts in the 90s and 2000s, but those guys nailed it because of the format and how they put it together and how they told that story, made it scalable. Just like a television show, say like The X Factor, for example, it's a format and it's very highly scalable. We've all had a lot of experience doing special events. Special events, there's a format to it, but it's constantly changing because you have to create a new sort of story arc or a new way of telling that story for each individual special event, right? It might still be a concert, but, are you doing 3 cameras? How many stages? What is there behind the scenes footage? Is there not? Like, what are all the components that make up the format of that particular show? For shoulder programming, yes. I mean, we've done, many, many years. First one was the Grammys in 2010. I got a chance to work with John on that one. And that was the first second screen live broadcast experience out there. So you had the television show, which is the Grammys, but we had a 36-hour live broadcast that led up to and was broadcast during and after the Grammys, all the way through. So that was just an expanded version of shoulder programming. Those clips that are in that show, so the packages, if you will, whether they be a 1-minute interview, a soundbite, or an actual package that we put together as a VOD, or maybe it's something a little bit longer, that's all clipped out for social and can be turned into memes, can be turned into Snapchat videos, Instagram pictures, whatever it might be. So, in our workflow, we'll have a control room that you might see that's a traditional broadcast control room, and then I'll have a whole separate trailer that's like the live social team, if you will. That's just banging all that stuff out. And each one of the platforms that we're, in essence, creating programming for, and we've designed ahead of time how we're creating that programming. For example, YouTube may get just a live stream and some VOD clips, whereas Facebook may not get any live stream and it's just getting social content. There has to be producers for each one of those tasks and a small team that executes it. And when you do it that way, it becomes highly scalable. And I think you'll see more and more, or at least I feel that we need more and more format-oriented live streaming that is episodic. That's what the big buyers like YouTube and Facebook will want because it's repetitive. It's also behavioral for the audience. They get used to that particular show. They like it, and so on. And that will separate this area of just straight UGC from actual storytelling and things that people can relate to, identify with, and come back to over and over again. So, there'll be a more dramatic shift, I think, with live over the next year.
It's great to see, you know, YouTube getting more aggressive into the space because Facebook has. We should give credit to YouTube because they were the first big platform out there of their scale to actually support live way back in 2007, actually. So it's been a long time, but that doesn't mean that they were the first doing streaming. Of course, go back even further, and it was Mark Cuban with broadcast.com and so on. But formats and storytelling, no matter what you're doing, are important.
Brian, you want to weigh in on that?
I couldn't agree more. I think even just the straightforward, you know, concert or music festival live streams, the on-demand component is extremely important for us. Even when you know, look at viewership of live versus VOD, there are certain events where it can be 50-50 or even weighted more in favor of on-demand. And those on-demand clips vary from, you know, single song, you know, performance clips to, you know, more lifestyle-oriented stuff or interviews or backstage. So live and on-demand, the two together are extremely important for us.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, VOD usually gets more views at the end of the day, long term, depending upon how it's continuously seeded, right? So another common mistake is you have this live broadcast and you think of it as a one-off event. Maybe you've seeded a bunch of platforms as VOD, and then it disappears. But really, you want to have a media strategy that extends it, because in essence, you're building a channel each time you do this, right? Yeah. So you want to be able to extend that and that investment as long as you can. You know, you go back to, again, like Coachella. People know that it's happening every year, but there's content that they're putting out there in between during the course of the years. But in my feeling, the opportunity is they should be putting out a whole lot more, because then it becomes a real network. You look at Sundance, for example, when they started streaming movies online during the film festival. You didn't need to go to the film festival. You buy a pass, you can stream it and watch it.
And Tribeca was doing that.
And Tribeca was doing it too. But these are important things because they used the live as a way to launch and enhance their own media network, which was a 365-day-a-year experience. And we did the same thing with Grammy Live in 2010. Grammy Live was launched during that 36 hours period, and now it's called Grammy TV. It generates several $1 million a year for the Recording Academy, and they're still using the same formats we created back then to do the live show every single season, and with a lot of other programming in between. So that's what endures.
Is this something that AEG Studios is looking at in terms of branded entertainment? I mean, is it just brands that is your ultimate client, or who is your ultimate client?
I think for us, brands are obviously the central piece, but original content and opportunities that we can monetize in other ways are absolutely interesting. We don't really consider ourselves currently in that space, but we feel that we have the potential to be. Obviously, we produce these shows all over the globe. We have tons of interactions. We have lots of digital infrastructure in terms of understanding our audience, how we create content out of that may be brand attached or not, is kind of the mix we're figuring out.
Well, the ability to even follow a tour of a major group, right? So there's certain, you know, one of my favorite parts of South by is the British Music Embassy Showcase, because there's a lot of acts from the UK that I love that they just don't really tour here because it's expensive. And so, you know, for me being able to watch them from their gig in Manchester or even London or what have you would be very very appealing. So, I mean, is there potential for that as well?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like we're in that case, then we're essentially, you know, we become the brand, and we then would be looking for the same thing. We're trying to crack the code. We're trying to, you know, make a case for, you know, where the return is on that for us. In other cases, we're essentially the agency, and then we're pairing up that brand with an opportunity. It's a little different mix for each one. Ultimately, it's all about who's going to fund it and kind of what's their end goal. So part of it's just being a matchmaker for
Right.
these opportunities, and kind of applying everything you've heard today to each different scenario.
Because, I mean, when live streaming was first discussed, you know, the immediate red flags went up. Oh, you know, if we do live streaming, then nobody's going to come to
Yeah.
our show or the festival. That's obviously been proven wrong.
That was a
Yeah.
battle 20 years ago. It's still a battle today.
It's still going on.
There's
That's
still-
why I brought it up.
I can't say it's disappeared, but I think most people understand that there's, you know, there's far more people in that waiting room to get a ticket than is actually going to show up to the show. But like what was said earlier, it's still awfully expensive to do these types of productions, and so the rare events are the, you know, the Coachellas, the Lalas, and things like that, and ACLs that really do have that critical mass. Can you right size a streaming opportunity down? Clearly you can. The technology, of course, is there on everybody's phone, but can you get the right mix that's still attractive to a brand or some other way to monetize that kind of micro sponsorship? And I think that's the almost not more interesting area, but I think there's a ton of growth potential there. I mean, I don't know how many shows we do a year. I probably should, but it's thousands.
Thousands.
It's thousands. If you look across all of AEG, and you're talking about a vast majority, obviously the overwhelming majority of those, we don't have our paws on in terms of streaming. There might be other folks doing certain types of capture in our venues, of course, but it's not our core business right now.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, because this is really fascinating, especially for AEG, because we've all worked with them and they're huge, obviously. The concert goer is your customer, right?
Sure.
So at the end of the day, brands aren't their customers. The kids who buy the tickets to go to the shows are the customer.
Absolutely.
And the venues are their partners. So it might not be AEG that's putting up the roadblocks so much as it is the other division in AEG that actually owns these venues and or you know, the venue partners that they're working with. They want to sell out beforehand. That said, you guys have a true opportunity, and this is something that Live Nation attempted a few years ago. Going back to the IMAG discussion, you sell tickets. So most of your shows are shot in some way, shape, or form, and it's just a question of getting that unproduced raw IMAG video out for quote-unquote shot, you know, sold-out shows that you can then sell as online tickets. I mean, that's an obvious direction for you guys to move in, and the cost and the economics of doing it are not that high because that IMAG is already in those facilities. It's a data connection and encoders and the architecture behind it.
So would that actually, because live streaming's been free and it's hard to go backwards, would you have the potential to charge somebody then?
They definitely
Especially
would.
if it's a sold out show?
It's definitely, obviously, I mean, Dan can speak to this, but on the VR side, it's clearly that's the model for a lot of the VR platforms,
Right.
looking for that, and perhaps, you know, you're talking about a much more enhanced experience. Maybe you get to reset, right? You get to reset people's expectations. I think right now people's expectations is that a streamed concert, for the most part, if you sit through a sponsor message, is free.
Right.
Trying to turn it on, I mean, you know, YouTube, we can talk about successes and challenges, but I do think that hasn't gotten here yet, and I don't know what that mix will be.
Yeah, I just think the other quick piece is that, you know, right-sizing the production is part of it. Making the economics work on that side is obviously key, but, you know, without marketing behind the stream and, you know, sponsors buying, you know, advertisements and, you know, participating on socials, nobody's going to find the stream. So I think it's also just really important to keep in mind the fact that you need money for marketing and promotion as well as production.
That's a great point.
I'll just touch on that on the VR side. We are actually currently selling virtual tickets. We built the payment system into Vertigo, which is the Universal Music Group platform, and we're selling right now Queen with Adam Lambert, which isn't the best in my, I mean,
As a real Queen fan?
As a Queen
I
fan,
won't get into this, but it's
don't talk
being live
politics
streamed
here.
right now.
Yeah, Brian, it's cool. No, but just to prove that it's happening, but we're in this weird place where it's like, there's only 12 million VR headsets actually in the world, only. I mean, it's a big number, but it's really not.
Yeah.
So it's like, we're just in the middle of really getting.
Yeah, I think we all believe in it, you know, in terms of spiritually that there are more audiences out there that potentially could be tuned in. There are definitely way more opportunities of stuff that could be streamed. And Brian and I were just talking about one of our festivals that absolutely should be, online and available. But yeah, that mix has been a little elusive. Unless, again, the Live Nation model has been to be out front, spend money, and kind of let the chips fall and then see what's kind of working. Our model has typically been a little bit different in terms of, developing an ROI model right out the gate.
Well, they have a pretty large brand sponsor to cover their entry into.
They've done a lot of different things, so I don't know all
right.
But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there going to be any questions? Okay. So you're going to try to, I'm going to have to repeat it because it's a live webcast. So if you can you tell me and then I'll repeat it. In lieu of what? Terrorism. Oh, terrorism.
So many concerts and so many large mass gatherings.
Right.
Is there a way to reinvent the concert experience? Is this an opportunity? I've been involved in 3 productions shot down by terrorists. They were closed down with major talent.
So the question is, does live streaming have the potential to replace the live music experience in the world of terrorism? You're obviously referring to what happened in Vegas. Yeah. Right, right.
Well, I'll take that one. I'll take the tough question. Obviously what's going on in the world right now with regards to both domestic attacks and acts by rogue groups is abhorrent. I think we all agree to that. But when you talk about live streaming, you're speaking about broadcasting something that's actually happening. So if you were saying, is there a way to reinvent the model, I would say that it's already happened. Anybody can start broadcasting live again from their phone, whether it's a musician, it's me, it's you right now. Or it could be, you look at something like Daryl's house, right? That he was doing for a while. It's just a bunch of musicians getting together over at his home, practicing music, playing music, and having an experience that's contained within that ecosystem that then still communicates the passion of music to that fan base and allows them to participate in it. So I think there's that. Will big, large-scale events ever go away? Gosh, I hope not, because it's one thing to have a participatory experience online, and that's stimulating your brain. You're maybe submitting content in real time that gets repurposed out. You're listening to it. You're having a visceral reaction, but it's still only taking a couple of your senses, right? And then when you actually get a group of people together, you have a different visceral reaction to that. I think that, not to sound gloomy, I think that just media in general, whether it's live streaming or television broadcasting, and the coverage that's given to a lot of this stuff is in fact encouraging it, because you have folks that want to become famous. Instead of 15 minutes, they get their 15 seconds of fame, if you will. So there is that challenge, but the upside is that they're caught a lot faster, because again, anybody with a mobile phone can see who is doing what at any given time, could be broadcasting it live at that moment, can be taking a picture of it at that moment, and whether it's an act by a rogue person or even by a member of the police department, there's a new checks and balances that are in place that this gives you that democratization that we haven't had before. So our world is changing, in short.
And I want to comment really quick as well. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of promoters, but I've interviewed a lot of them and done research on festival operations both in the States and in the UK. And I know that health and safety divisions of promoters, especially a festival operation, those are really those people really do their homework, and they're constantly evolving their strategies, because I mean, even with the fact that weather has changed and has impacted the safety of fans, has caused them to rethink crowd flow, security, communication devices, how they communicate with the fans, how they communicate with each other. Guaranteed, they are having major discussions about all of this right now, globally, not just here in the States. Yes, sir.
Considering the growth in the mobile platform for viewers around the world, and using VR bandwidth is a challenge. So I've been looking at 3D versions that could expand the reach and grow into VR in the future. I'm not getting too much about 3D.
So your question is, what is the potential for 3D as opposed to VR?
Relative to bandwidth usage on mobile platforms.
Use on mobile. Are you talking about 360 or are you talking about actual 3D? 360, yeah. 360 is actually, from what I have talking to people like Dan, and I'll let you chime in, but 360, usually with a VR activation, 360 is part of it as well, because they want to have as many people be able to experience it as possible. So 360 on a mobile device is kind of de facto standard, and then there's the VR side of things. But Dan, you want to speak to that?
I want to touch on both of those questions, actually, because the answer that we don't, as a VR company, we don't ever want to take away the live experience. I mean, that's the point. Like, that's my life. I love that. We want to bring more people there and make them feel like they're part of the audience. But we are working on building, we've done this, we've built virtual venues where people can come in as a social experience, as avatars, and communicate with people all over the world and be at this concert. We're scanning artists, a 3D holographic scan of the artist, and placing that graphic asset into the virtual space, which is completely CGI. And you're going to see some of these soon, which is really, really exciting. But we don't ever want to take it away from the...
Are you doing any blockchain imprint signatures on your...
We are not. We are not at this point.
You're not doing what?
Blockchain.
Oh, blockchain. Oh, okay.
It's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
A couple of questions about the economics, especially on breakdowns. So there hasn't been any talk about clearances. That's one. Where is all this coming from? Is there a usual kind of a standard split that you're finding between production costs, talent payouts, profit for the companies doing this? And then what about the variable costs when something gets more popular? Is that tied into your contract with the brands, or who's eating that? If there's got to be CDN costs for the bandwidth that go up with the viewing, it's not flat.
So the question was about operational budgets, how costs are allocated and broken up in terms of royalty rights, right, user rights, getting rights, because going through rights holder issues with, especially with artists and so forth. Global analytics, right. Right.
I'll only say that rights are complicated, and then I'm going to turn it over to
it's a good question. I also think there's a lot of confusion about this issue. Yeah. We are not, when we're doing a live stream of an artist performing a concert or festival, we're not licensing the music in perpetuity for a film or a TV show, which I understand is cumbersome, difficult, and very costly. This is largely a moment in time. Historically, the live performance has been the domain and the decision of the artist, and as Raymond points out, they now, I started doing this festival streaming 7 years ago. We would get about 60% artist participation. Now it's over 90, right? They get it, they want to amplify what they're doing, they want to reach they've invested very heavily in their social media followings. They're not selling CDs for $18.99 anymore. A lot of it's discovery related, and it's very important to them to take their experience and bring it out to a bigger audience. Having said that, they're also, promoters pay very well for them to be at these festivals. I've seen numbers like it's 4 to 20 times what it normally is to perform live. So they're already there, it's happening, it's an important part of their business, but it's entirely up to them. If they don't want to do this, and they don't want to, deliver their experience out to viewers on connected devices, entirely their decision. But I think the positives far, far outweigh the negatives. Having said that, the replay and the short window of time, yeah, we pay for that, right? We pay the publisher and the record label. Sometimes it can be a cumbersome, difficult dialogue, but also at the end of the day, if it becomes cost prohibitive, to your point, there's production, there's marketing, and there's bandwidth. If the economics don't work out and one artist or 5 don't want to do it, 57 others at that festival would like to do it. And I think people in this business now know who gets it and who wants to do it and who doesn't. But ideally, it leads to incremental sales for them. I think we brought up the concept of, if I live stream, am I going to sell more tickets? And I watched Michael Rapino, who's the #1 ticket seller on the planet, go on to CNBC to announce and discuss his partnership with Vice, where he's going to put live concerts on the Vice platform. The very first question he was asked is, Michael, aren't you going to in fact cannibalize ticket sales? And he says, it's just the inverse. The more live streams I offer, the more ticket inventory I sell. So there's a lot of reasons positively to do this, and there are discussions to be had, of course. But if this becomes it's still early days of this market. If it becomes the Super Bowl and there's massive dollars flowing through here, everyone's going to benefit: artist, promoter, performer, brand, viewer, etc. So there's still ground to be covered, but I think those are some of the key factors in the discussion today.
Yeah, I would just want to add to that. I think the short answer is it depends on who's paying for it, right? If a brand is going to do a brand event, for example, well, then the artist is going to be paid to appear at that event and to perform at that event, and then of course be paid an additional amount of money for that artist to be broadcast. So it's a money thing. They're going to get paid up front. If it's in this scenario, it could be, in most cases, it's free. They see the inherent benefit of being a part of the broadcast, and they sign off on it, and then it's a negotiation with the publishers who you have to pay. But typically,
I'm pretty sure if a band goes on Saturday Night Live, they're not getting paid to do that. They're promoting their record and
they get well, according to RIAA, they have to get at least scale as musicians because they're all in unions. So you still have to pay that in the TV world, but that's a very good point. One thing that we should all completely keep in mind, the whole reason why, well, there's 3 really big reasons why I think online streaming has finally accelerated, and having been in it for 20 some odd years, one thing we want to keep in mind is that we don't have the same FCC regulations as television. That's a huge big deal, right? If we had those regulations, platforms like YouTube, for example, you're looking at immediately billions of dollars in fines, like tomorrow. So there's a reason why they have lobbyists and fight against that. Second reason is unions. They were all late to the game, whether it was DGA, Writers Guild, SAG, music unions, even the publishers early on, trying to clear music in the 90s to do a live stream, or even last week sometimes it's hard depending upon which publisher you're talking to. They just don't get it. They don't understand. And then the third reason is obviously it's not television. It's two-way. It's participatory. So that has really made the entire industry flourish. But I don't think, there's a specific formula of a ratio like you can calculate a CAC in terms of we're going to spend 1/3 of our X amount of dollars on production and the other third is going to be on this. I've found it in my experience that if we're just clearing music publishing, and if I'm looking at, say, $1 million production budget, I might allocate 10% for music clearances, depending upon what it is. If it's a festival, for example, that's a fairly good number to use.
Yes.
Piggybacking on that, we're talking about negotiating rights for these live streams. Are archive rights generally assumed from the outset of that discussion?
Nothing's assumed in the music business. John, you want to speak to that more? But the short of it is,
I think the historic model is 3-phase, right? We'll go live, do the live performances of the bands. Replay, headliner, Paul McCartney finishes his headlining set. We replay that entire day 1 or 2 times until you're back on the air on Saturday or Sunday. And then there's a window, 30, 40, maybe 60 days of VOD. That's all compensated and paid. Granted, as long as it's a reasonable payout. But the other thing, too, to take away from here is these are pretty compelling productions. These are broadcast grade
Quality,
camera operators. These are Grammy-winning producers. That's an asset that we can share back to the band, right? You're walking away with a pretty compelling asset that you can exploit across, in partnership with your record label, across your social media platforms, that's funded by a third party. So in addition to your performance that you're getting paid for, you're coming away with a pretty compelling experience. And in pre-post, that can also be, audio can be remixed and things can be enhanced as well.
Yep.
It becomes a very compelling tool for them.
It does. And the irony is the majority of the productions out there that are live concert productions do not see any kind of repurposing in other media outside of digital. So the record labels really, it's a huge opportunity that they're missing. Sure, on the bigger artists it happens, or if you're strategizing it from the beginning, like, we did a project a few years back with Incubus, and from the onset it was 7 days of live broadcast programming, 8 hours a day, but we knew we were going to make a movie at the end of it and have a limited edition DVD box set with like records in it and fan art and all this other kind of stuff. So that was planned. And if you can actually work with the managers who work with the artists, and again, it's artist driven, it's something they want to do, and has some sort of potential historical relevance to that album and the creative vision that they have at that time, that I find works a lot better than the amount of stuff that we've all shot on this panel. Sure, I've seen some of the stuff that we've shot turn into TV commercials. We did a couple of concerts with Steve Aoki, and boom, there was our footage in his television commercial. I was like, well, how did that happen? So it just happened.
Don't assume anything.
Don't assume anything in the music business. And in terms of it turning it into television shows, well, you have to recut it and repackage it and reformat it a little bit for television. But to John's point, it's shot the same way. The level of production is exactly the same as if you were going out on NBC, or at least on this panel level of production quality.
We've come to the end. We are all good here. I just want to, one last note, somebody mentioned blockchain. I think when you're talking about rights and contracts and all how hard it is to get clearances and things like that, I think the potential for utilizing, Ethereum contracts going into the future, once we get to that point, once the world gets to that point, I think will be really, really interesting. And that, as a whole, has a lot of great potential to solve some of the problems in the music and entertainment industry. But thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming to this session. I hope you were able to learn a few things. And thank you. Have a good day.